Week 8 of Big Brother 27 has come and gone, and with this week being the final week of the pre-jury phase of the game, some of these house guests were willing to do whatever it takes to move on to the next phase of this game. Whether it's throwing their allies under the bus or crying and begging to not go up on the block, or a combination of the both, these house guests were willing to fight it out for that next spot. But how did it all break down? Well, that's why I'm here. In this video, I'm going to be recapping the events of Week 8 of Big Brother 27 and giving my updated power rankings. So with all that preamble out of the way, it is the one and only RJ21 here, and let's get into the Big Brother 27 Week 8 recap and power ranking. Week 8 starts off with the Mystere Moments HOH competition, which had the house guests watching a compilation of GIFs and clips from earlier in the season. Then, the house guests then participated in a quiz-based competition, where the house guests had to answer true or false questions. Get the answer right and you stay in the game, but get the answer wrong and you're eliminated. The last house guest standing will become the new head of household. Ultimately, the competition came down to Keanu and Kelley, which is some house guests' worst case scenario. But by the end of it, Keanu comes out on top and wins and becomes the new head of household. After Keanu wins, Keanu is celebrating with Kelley because the two of them have been on the bottom of the house for basically this entire game. And with him winning HOH, it practically guarantees that both himself and Kelley are going to be making it to the jury phase of the game, and they are both absolutely ecstatic about it. But they both know that they have to make the best move for their games moving forward in order to set themselves best up to get to those final two chairs, even though Keanu doesn't want to go to the final two with Kelley. Keanu and Rachel then have a conversation where Keanu apologizes for all of his backstabbing behavior in the prior week, and that this week he is going to make it up to Rachel by not nominating her or even considering to put her up on the block whatsoever to rebuild that relationship. And this honestly does some really good work as it gets Rachel back on Keanu's good side. However, it's in this conversation where Keanu also promises that he is also probably not going to put Ashley up on the block, which does come back to bite him in the butt later in the week. We then see Rachel relaying this information to Ashley, where Rachel tells Ashley that Keanu told her that he is not going to put neither Ashley nor Rachel up on the block, and even though Ashley is skeptical at first, Ashley has no choice but to believe it because she's not in power, and she can't really do anything to change that. We then see Morgan and Vince panicking about this HOH result because neither of them are necessarily the closest with Keanu. Morgan has never been on the same page with Keanu in terms of the game, and Vince has burned Keanu multiple times. So both of them obviously have a lot of reasons to be worried, but they both comfort each other and tell each other that they're both going to make it out at the end of this week. Vince and Keanu have a conversation that produces probably my favorite clip of the entire season. Basically, Vince is trying to convince Keanu that he is his ally and that he is going to work with Keanu. But Keanu doesn't believe this whatsoever because Keanu has been burned by Vince at least 3 times before this HOH. So Keanu has no reason to trust Vince. So Keanu essentially tells Vince that he is going to be putting Vince on the block to ensure that Morgan, his initial target, goes home, and that if Vince were to win the power of veto, he wouldn't use it to save Morgan. And even though Vince is crying and pleading for Keanu to not put him up on the block, Keanu isn't budging whatsoever. And Vince goes on an absolute emotional breakdown as he starts talking about how he threw away his game and that he's such a bitch and how he ruined everything and he should have fallen on the sword. And it's so funny. It's genuinely my favorite clip of the entire season. We then see Rachel and Keanu talking, but not necessarily about game. They're more so just repairing their relationship because of all the bad work that Keanu had done in the prior week. And Keanu really wanted to make it up to Rachel. So they're having this more so heartfelt conversation about where they both stand in the game, but they want to continue protecting each other, and the frenemies are officially back on. Morgan and Vince then have a conversation where Vince essentially confirms to Morgan that he is going to be going up on the block to ensure that if he were to win the power veto, he wouldn't use it to save Morgan. And Morgan is initially confused by this because from Morgan's perspective, it doesn't make sense for Keanu to put Vince on the block, somebody who could potentially be an ally for Keanu. But later, Morgan and Keanu have a conversation where they're talking about potential nominees, and Keanu floats around the idea about how only 2 people knew that Keanu was targeting Rachel, and so if Rachel found out about it, there's only 2 suspects that he can look at, which are Morgan and Vince. And Morgan obviously goes into self-preservation mode and says, I didn't leak anything. And Keanu retorts by saying, well, if you didn't say anything, then you just gave me the perfect reason to put Vince on the block. The exact opposite of what Morgan wanted to happen. So this whole conversation was pretty counterproductive. Ava and Keanu then have a conversation to where even though Ava and Keanu have had their beef in the past, Keanu doesn't want to nominate Ava whatsoever, considering that out of everybody on that quote-unquote other side of the house, Keanu has the best relationship outside of Rachel with Ava, and Keanu wants to rebuild that. So, as an act of trust, he doesn't want to put Ava up, which is music to Ava's ears. We then see Mickey and Keanu having a conversation where Mickey is trying to feel Keanu out and see where they lie, and Mickey obviously gives the obvious spiel of, if you don't put me on the block, we can work together in the future, but Keanu isn't buying it whatsoever because Mickey had put Keanu up on the block on her HOH, and they had never worked together after that. So there is no reason for Keanu to protect Mickey at this point. Vince then tries to have a conversation with Keanu one last time to ensure that he doesn't go up on the block, especially this close to the jury phase, and that would be Vince's worst nightmare. So Vince is trying to go hard to convince Keanu that he is an ally and that he is somebody that Keanu can trust. But Keanu stands his ground firmly and tells Vince that if you go home, it honestly wouldn't be the worst case scenario for my game, and that Keanu does not trust Vince whatsoever because of all the shady stuff that Vince has done in the past. So it's pretty much a done deal that Vince is going on the block. So at the nomination ceremony, Keanu chooses to nominate Morgan, Vince, and Mickey, with Morgan as the target. After the nomination ceremony, Keanu and Rachel are having a conversation where they're basically just confirming to each other that Keanu made the right nominations and that Rachel is still good. Obviously, this is an act of self-preservation from Rachel to ensure that she's not going to be going up as the replacement nominee and is not going to get backdoored, but they're basically just reconfirming to each other that they are still working together and that they are still tight. We then see Kelley comforting Vince because obviously Vince hates that he's on the block and Kelley doesn't want Vince to feel bad, but secretly, Kelley doesn't really care about Vince because Vince has never really cared about Kelley. So even though Kelley is comforting Vince in this moment and is acting like she cares, she could really care less about whether or not Vince goes home this week. On the other side of the house, we see Ashley and Ava absolutely celebrating the fact that they're not on the block. They're dancing, they're praising Jesus, they're doing all of it, the whole 10 yards, because they honestly did not expect to not be up on the block. But the fact that Keanu put Vince up and said one of them is something that they're definitely going to be reveling in. We then see Keanu and Mickey having a conversation where Keanu is confirming to Mickey that she isn't the target, even though she is the backup target if Morgan were to win the power of veto. But this makes Mickey pretty worried, as if Morgan were to win the power of veto, or if any of the nominations were to change, that would risk somebody on her side that she is close with, potentially somebody like Ashley, going up on the block. And this makes Mickey really nervous, as she doesn't want that opportunity to rise up whatsoever. We then see Morgan and Vince having yet another pity party, as they're both super sad that they're not only on the block, but on the block next to each other yet again. And Morgan is especially sad because she knows that she's the target and she needs to win the power veto, but she hasn't won anything this entire season, despite being a former athlete and a gamer, like a professional gamer. She's expecting herself to win everything, and she's just not performing at the level she expects herself to. So going into this veto competition, she's not exactly having the most self-confidence. So to try and mitigate her anxiety, Morgan has a conversation with Keanu about where they stand in the game, and Keanu essentially confirms to Morgan that she is the target and that they've never really saw eye to eye with one another in the game. And so because of that, Morgan isn't really somebody that Keanu is prioritizing keeping in the game, which fuels Morgan even more to go out there and win that power veto at all costs. We then see Keanu doing a little bit of backtracking in a weird Keanu sort of way. Even though Keanu put Vince on the block, Keanu doesn't want Vince to go home. It was more so to just teach him a lesson. It's a really weird way to teach him a lesson, but that's whatever. So at this point, Keanu wants to get as many people competing in the power veto competition to take Vince off of the block. So he's having a conversation with Kelley to see if he were to pick Kelley to compete in the power veto, whether or not she would use the power veto on Vince. And even though Kelley tells Keanu that she would use it on Vince, Kelley has other plans in mind. If she were to win the power veto, she might use it to save Morgan and build a new, fresh relationship there over somebody like Vince, who has continuously burned her. But Kelley's telling Keanu exactly what he wants to hear. We then see Keanu having the same conversation with Lauren, to where if Keanu gets the choice, should he pick Lauren to compete in the power veto, and if Lauren would use the power veto to save Vince. And even though Lauren does question Keanu's logic, Lauren knows that she has to keep Vince around as an ally because Vince is a very loyal number to her, at least in her perspective. So if Lauren does get picked and she does win the veto, she more likely than not would use that power veto on Vince. But who knows where her indecisiveness would take her. We then pick players for the power veto competition, where the HOH and Keanu, the three nominees in Morgan, Vince, and Mickey, and Lauren and Kelley, who are selected by random draw, are all going to compete. The best case scenario for Keanu, somehow, And this veto competition is the Charcuterie Protection Agency, and it's hosted by none other than Big Brother 26 icon Angela Murray. And if it's going to be a charcuterie competition, of course Angela is going to come and host it. It was so fun to see her back, and it's just so fun to see her interacting with everybody else on the cast. But this competition themed around Angela is the item stacking competition we'd seen in such as like the Mackenzie Week 9 HOH competition that she won, or the Week 1 Power Veto from Big Brother 25. Basically, these house guests have 35 different items that they stack on this thin platform. But to make it a little bit more difficult, at predetermined intervals, an Angela attacker is going to come through and sweep out their entire board, knocking down everything that they had stacked up until that point. Whichever house guest can stack up all 35 items before getting knocked down by Angela's attacker and hits their buzzer will win the Golden Power Veto. Honestly, this competition was pretty close. At one point, Vince was in the lead, and then Mickey was in the lead, and then Kelley was in the lead. But by the end of it, Morgan comes out on top and wins the Golden Power Veto, her first competition win of the season. After the veto competition, Rachel knows she's in a bad position because if those nominations do end up changing, which they most likely are, then she knows that either herself or her close ally in Ashley is going to be at risk of being the replacement nominee. And she does not want that to happen whatsoever. So she concocts this crazy plan to try and get Lauren put up as the replacement nominee. It's so crazy that it just might work. And it's honestly the best case scenario for her game at this point. So Rachel later has a conversation with Keanu where Rachel pitches this plan of putting Lauren up as the replacement nominee. And Keanu is absolutely denying this plan whatsoever, as it would go against his whole moral code about targeting his allies and putting his allies up on the block if he were to put up Lauren. It would just put him in a bad position, and I respect Rachel for trying, but it honestly was never going to work with Keanu. Ashley and Keanu then have a conversation where Ashley is pitching herself as to why she shouldn't go up as the replacement nominee. She knows that either herself or Ava is going up as the replacement nominee, and Ashley tells Keanu that if she does end up going up on the block by Keanu, she is going to interpret that as a shot and that she is going to be targeting Keanu afterwards. And obviously, that is a threat to Keanu's safety in the game, which incentivizes Keanu to put Ashley up on the block even more. We then see Keanu concocting this crazy, mischievous plan with Vince that's so crazy, it just might work. Except this time, Keanu's the one in power, so he actually has the ability to make it go through. Basically, Keanu is going to pitch this idea of Morgan using the power veto on Vince and promising Morgan that he would put up Lauren. But then, when Morgan saves Vince, he's going to go back on his word and just put up Ashley. It's super slimy and it's super mischievous, but it's the type of Big Brother that I love to watch. So Keanu has a conversation with Morgan, and Morgan brings up this crazy idea of what if I just use the power veto on Vince? And Keanu goes hard in on that plan, saying that, well, Morgan, if you did do that and you did use the power veto to save Vince, I would put up Lauren as the replacement nominee. And this gets Morgan thinking, and she's seriously considering not using the power veto to save herself and considers using it to save Vince because she knows she has the votes to stay next to Lauren. But it's a stupid plan because you're on the block and you're the HOH's target. So why would you use the power veto on somebody else and not save yourself? It doesn't make sense. And for a majority of that time before the veto ceremony, Morgan was strongly considering not using the veto to save herself, which is crazy. The only time when Morgan stops considering this plan is when she has a conversation with Rachel, where Rachel tells Morgan that she's crazy, and even though it would make for absolutely amazing television, it would be a super bad move for Morgan's game, and Morgan eventually comes down from that ledge and settles back down on using the power veto to save herself, which should have been obvious, but this cast is just so crazy. Rachel and Keanu then have a conversation where Rachel is campaigning hard for Ashley to not go up as the replacement nominee. And Rachel subtly throws Ava under the bus, saying, well, if you only have two people to put up and I don't want you to put Ashley up, then I guess you have to put Ava up. But this does nothing but pushes Rachel away from Keanu, to where Keanu is somewhat considering not even putting Ashley up on the block and says, well, if putting Ashley up on the block burns that bridge with Rachel anyways, I might as well put up Rachel, which leads Keanu to think about actually putting Rachel up on the block, even though he'd spent this entire week trying to repair that relationship with Rachel, which is just so backwards, but it's Keanu logic we're dealing with. So at the veto ceremony, Morgan thankfully uses the power veto to save herself, and Keanu nominates Ashley as the replacement nominee, with Ashley, Mickey, and Vince as the final nominees going into the blockbuster. However, that's not where this conversation ends, as Ashley absolutely pops off on Keanu. She goes absolutely Jimmy style and calls out Keanu and his Tarzan toes, calling Keanu a liar and claims that he's a narcissist and arrogant and talks down to women and is this sort of master manipulator trying to control everything, and that she hates puppet masters. And Rachel joins in on that, also joining in the fact that calling Keanu a liar and a manipulator and that he lied about Ashley being safe throughout the entire week. It's not really a good look for either Ashley or Keanu, and it really pushes away the one vote that they both need, Ava. Ava is the swing vote at this point in the week and is really wavering on whether or not she should keep Ashley or evict Ashley. So this is honestly just a fight that's super entertaining, but it's not really productive for any party involved. At this point, Mickey knows that she is the target since Morgan saved herself, so she needs to go to work to campaign and get the votes to secure her safety. And even though Mickey says throughout the entire week that she doesn't want to campaign against Ashley, she does a lot of campaigning against Ashley. She goes to the likes of Kelley and Ava and is really pushing hard as to why she should stay over Ashley. She's really going to the likes of Will and really trying to push for those votes because those are the key critical votes that Mickey needs in order to stay. We then get to the BB Blockbuster, which this week is called Forensic Frenzy, and it's basically the Week 3 AI Arena from Big Brother 26, and it's the ticket machine competition. Basically, the HouseGuests are going to be in this air chamber and they have to get their DNA balls and put them in their test tube. However, it's not as simple as just getting one color and putting them all in. Instead, the HouseGuests have to grab the correct color corresponding balls and match a pattern. If they get any of the balls wrong, they have to empty out their entire stack. Whichever HouseGuest can complete their color pattern first will win the Blockbuster and earn their safety. It was honestly a really close competition between both Vince and Mickey, as they both had the same strategy of storing DNA balls in their jacket and then putting it into their tubes in the correct order. But by the end of it, Vince comes out on top and wins the BB Blockbuster, earning his safety, leaving Ashley and Mickey as the final nominees. There was some last-minute campaigning, but it felt like both of them were confident in their votes. But because both of them were confident, one of them had to be wrong. So, come the live vote and eviction, by a vote of 6-1, Mickey is the 8th HouseGuest and the final pre-juror to be evicted from the Big Brother house.
That's why we like Big Brother. I am sad. In the words of Catherine, I am sad.
Now it's time to get into the power rankings. At number 10, the most recently evicted HouseGuest, we have Mickey. And after her HOH reign, it was basically just an inevitability and a waiting game until Mickey was eventually evicted. And for her to be evicted as the final pre-juror of the season is just, it's poetic justice. What can I say? After Mickey's HOH reign, her game absolutely plummeted. Before her HOH reign, she was in a power position running things. She had such close ties with everybody in the house. Everybody wanted to work with her. Everybody loved her, and everybody wanted to bring her deep into the game. But after her HOH reign, she just burned all of those bridges and sapped all of her social capital. She built so much mistrust between herself and her allies that nobody really trusted her after her HOH reign. She was really on the bottom of the house after that HOH reign. It was just so disastrous, and it was so bad for her game that if her HOH reign actually went well, she could have easily dominated to the end of this game. But instead, she ended up targeting her own ally for really no reason, and she ends up going home. And this week, she actually talked herself into being in a poor position to where Mickey obviously was in danger if she was sitting on the block next to Ashley. However, if Mickey was sitting on the block next to Vince post-Blockbuster, Mickey actually had a really, really good chance of staying in the game. But because of all of Mickey's lies and her unnecessary pandering to everybody's votes to try and gain their votes so she can stay, Mickey ended up burning everybody in the process to where before the votes and before the live feeds went down, it seemed like pretty unanimous that if Mickey is sitting on the block post-Blockbuster, she is going home damn near unanimously. And that's what we end up see happening. And the fact that she was blindsided by the results and she wasn't expecting it, it should just go to show how delusional she was about her actual standing in the game. And because of that, she ends up here at number 10.
I don't know what's worse, Kelley winning or Keanu winning. I'll start packing my bags now.
Now it's time to talk about the HouseGuests that are actually still in the game. At number 9, the HouseGuest I believe to be in the worst position in the house is Keanu. And Keanu had the potential to do something really good with this HOH, but instead he absolutely ruined everything that he had set up in the prior weeks. The intentions of this HOH were to get somebody out on the other side and to rebuild his trust with Rachel. And even though he does succeed in the first one, the manner in which he does it does the exact opposite of what he wanted to do. He ends up putting Vince up on the block to teach him a lesson But it's like, why would you risk your ally going home by putting them up on the block? Yes, you can teach them a lesson, but you can teach them a lesson by, not putting them up on the block. And just the simple threat of him going up on the block, especially with somebody like Vince, he's definitely going to be so scared into aligning with Keanu. But instead, by putting Vince on the block, he's essentially severing that tie and giving Vince the perfect out to not only betray him, but put him on the block and backstab him. So that whole thing just absolutely backfired on him. And in the fact that he wanted to rebuild his trust with Rachel, he ends up severing that tie yet again by putting Ashley up on the block. Yes, I understand that that is what was best for Keanu's game, but Keanu handles it in such a poor way with Rachel to where Rachel is now once again targeting Keanu. Keanu is now a huge house target for practically everybody in the house to where the only people that wouldn't target Keanu are like Kelley and Lauren, which is super bad. And Keanu can't compete in HOH next week, which means he's going to be in a really, really bad position, basically depending on those other competitions like the veto or the blockbuster to save himself, which is really, really bad. Yes, he can win those competitions, but the fact that he put himself in that position when he was just HOH is way worse, which is why I have him here at number 9.
If you're going to tell me some like around and find out, that's two of my favorite things, around and finding out.
At number 8, I have Kelley. And Kelley just doesn't care. She doesn't care to actually strategize or play the game of Big Brother. She's just living her life in that house, which honestly, if you're doing that and that's what you want, you know what, you go do that. But the fact that she's not playing whatsoever is just super infuriating. And the fact that she's in the jury, like, it's already crazy enough that Keanu's in the jury, but the fact that both Keanu and Kelley are in the jury, like, so frustrating. But in terms of the game, Kelley is just such a weird player. Like, she knows that she's in a bad position. She actively wants to build herself into a better position, but then just doesn't. Like, she said in the episode that she wants to build this bond potentially with Morgan, but she doesn't actually do any of the good work or the actual, like, legwork to make that a reality. Like, she just says, I want this to happen, and then just expects it to happen for her. Like, she needs to actually do things for these things to happen. And now she's at the bottom of the house to where she is that primary target alongside Keanu. They're linked together as a duo, and if literally anybody else except herself or Lauren win HOH, it's pretty likely that both Keanu and Kelley are going to be seeing the block. So it's honestly so infuriating, the fact that Kelley is just so indignant about her position in the game and just completely like complains and whines about everything, but then doesn't do anything to solve it. The fact that she's in this bottom position is pretty much her own fault, and she doesn't really have anybody else to blame for this, despite how much she may blame everything on Rachel. But all in all, Kelley's in a bad position because she's just not doing anything, and she's just choosing to leave all of these connections just on the table, just not doing anything, which is why I have her here at number 8.
If I win, I could take down Vince, who has burned me multiple times in this game and has never been a friend to me, or Morgan.
At number 7, I have Rachel. And before we even talk about like her game position as of right now, I have to applaud all of the impressive work she's put in up until this point. She has made it the entire pre-jury phase without ever going up on the block. Like, the fact that so many people were targeting Rachel and so many people said that they would come after Rachel, and she still made it to this point in the game without ever seeing the block, I have to applaud it. Like, this is far and away Rachel's best season in terms of gameplay. And the fact that she's made it this far, I have to give her her 10s. Like, she's absolutely killing it right now. But in terms of this week, it wasn't the worst case scenario, but it certainly wasn't the best. Losing Mickey is really bad for Rachel because Mickey was a shield for Rachel. And Mickey could have been somebody in front of Rachel that other people, like somebody like, I don't know, a Lauren, or if Keanu won HOH again, Mickey was somebody in front of Rachel that could have been a good shield for her. But now that Mickey is gone, Rachel is now that number one target for the likes of like Kelley and Lauren. So Rachel is definitely in a bad position in that sense. Plus, she essentially severed her tie with Keanu, even though it was Keanu's fault. Rachel has essentially declared that she is no longer really working with Keanu, so that really puts her in a really dangerous position. But once again, she has so many close allies around her. The likes of Ashley and Will and Ava are so undyingly loyal and close to Rachel, and they want to protect her, that it does leave Rachel in this weird middling position to where she has really close allies, but a lot of people actively targeting her. It's really weird, But I do think Rachel is going to be able to recover from this if certain competitions go her way, which do I have her here at number 7.
Keanu, are you okay? Like, somebody help me.
At number 6, I have Vince. And this week was a bit of a mixed bag for Vince. On one hand, it was really bad because he got nominated and he was a target to where if he did end up on the block next to Ashley post Blockbuster, there is a very, very real chance that Vince does end up going home one before jury, which is like his worst nightmare ever. But he has a really good week in the sense that literally everything after that nomination goes pretty well for him. After that nomination, Keanu realizes that maybe he did make a mistake, which he obviously did, and Keanu is now rallying to get people that would use the power of veto on him, to where a majority of the people in that veto competition were going to use the power of veto to save Vince. So the fact that so many people want to keep Vince safe in this game is obviously spelling well for his future prospects. At this point, I don't really see that many people actively targeting Vince, but at the same time, I don't think Vince has that super solid social capital to progress himself any further. Everybody is catching on to Vince's weaselly ways. Everybody knows that all of his waterworks are fake and that he isn't really super apologetic for everything that he does. He just puts on an act and he just like starts crying and says, I'm such a fucking bitch, man, and I'm the worst player in the world, and if the nicest guy in the world doesn't like me, then obviously I did something wrong. Like, ew! Like, that's so gross. That genuinely gives me the ick. Like, that's such pick-me energy, but also, it's so hilarious. It's so funny, that whole emotional breakdown and tirade with no tears, might I add. Full-on crocodile tears throughout that entire conversation. But the fact that Vince is trying to play victim so hard in all these conversations and everybody is catching on to him, nobody really feels sympathetic for Vince anymore, and everybody is really catching on to how he's playing this game. So nobody really super trusts Vince like that, except for Morgan. But that's a whole entirely different relationship that I don't even want to get into at this point. Overall, Vince is in a bit of a mixed bag of a position to where he's not actively being targeted by a lot of people, but he doesn't necessarily have as solid of a backing to keep himself safe, which is why I have him here at number 6.
He doesn't care whether I'm here or not. Pretty harsh stuff, but alright.
At number 5, I have Ashley. And this week was not a good week for Ashley. This is the first time that she's been nominated since week 1. So the fact that she's getting nominated this late into the game is always going to put her in a precarious position. But even then, she's always had the numbers to stay. She obviously had Rachel's side in the likes of Rachel and Will and potentially Ava. But outside of that, Ashley had the Judges Alliance. So at large, Ashley always had the numbers to stay. But outside of that, she didn't necessarily come out of this week looking the best. Her fight with Keanu was just unnecessary. Like, yes, it was iconic. Yes, it was entertaining. But she didn't necessarily get that argument out what she wanted. She wanted to paint Keanu as a liar and a master manipulator and somebody that you can't trust. But it's like, everybody already thought that. So there was really no point in it. It was just really trying to kick Keanu while he was down and kind of beating a dead horse. So actually, that whole argument was just pretty much unnecessary. But Ashley's campaign this week was actually really impressive. Ashley was going to work to try and secure Ava's vote, and it honestly worked. On a personal level, Ava didn't really like Ashley, but after Ashley's whole campaign, Ava and Ashley are like best friends. Like, they were super close after that whole campaign. So the fact that Ashley was able to put in that much good work definitely spells well for her, and Ashley was just able to solidify all of those numbers on that side super well. So that puts Ashley in a pretty good position, but what makes me worried is that Ashley is being perceived as Rachel's number 1 ally. So if somebody like a Kelley or Lauren were to win HOH, I think those nominations would obviously be Rachel and Ashley, which puts Ashley at risk, because if Rachel were to win a competition, or if Rachel was just able to rally the votes around her, that does mean Ashley would go home. So it does put her in a bit of danger, but she's not a primary target. So it does leave her in a better position, which is why I have her here at number 5.
I'm not backing down. If you put me up on that block, Keanu, I am coming for you. My daddy didn't raise no fool.
At number 4, I have Morgan. And this week was a pretty good week for Morgan, all things considered. First and foremost, she won a competition finally. So nobody can make those memes about her anymore saying, oh, Morgan Pope has won 0 competitions this season. So she finally was able to get that curse off of her back. But outside of that, I would call her week a pretty successful one, if it weren't for the fact that she was so close to not using the power veto to save herself. It genuinely makes no sense. It is the bare minimum. If you have the veto and you're on the block, you should use it to save yourself. But the fact that Morgan was so strongly considering for such a long period of time to not use the power veto to save herself and is using it to save Vince, genuinely mind-boggling, genuinely insane. I can't believe she was strongly considering it for that long in the game. Like, it's so frustrating. I want to call Morgan's week a success, but the fact that she was considering that for so long just doesn't spell really well for her. But at the end, she doesn't use the power veto to save Vince, so I guess that's a plus. But genuinely, that's the bare minimum. But outside of that, I don't see Morgan really getting targeted by anyone at this point. The only real person who was targeting Morgan was Keanu, but now Keanu can't win HOH next week. So I don't really foresee anybody actively targeting Morgan anymore. Like if somebody like a Kelley or a Lauren were to win HOH, they're going after the likes of Rachel and Ashley and Will as a potential renom, because at that point, I think that they are so closely tied with Rachel, people more so associate Morgan with Vince. So they're not really wanting to touch that at that point, and they really want to prioritize getting Rachel's side out. So it does put Morgan in a bit of a better position, but that does mean her allies do have to be put at risk in order for her to stay safe if her side doesn't win competitions. So obviously that isn't the best for her, but for her to not be a target, it's still pretty good for her, which is why I have her here at number 4.
Do I risk it for a huge biscuit? I don't know. Ugh.
At number 3, I have Lauren. And just like Rachel, Lauren made it throughout the entire pre-jury phase of the game without ever touching the block. However, unlike Rachel, Lauren was never targeted. The only times Lauren was ever in danger was like week 5 with the whole Zach's power and a veto being used and Lauren being the 5th renom, or this most recent week where Rachel was pitching for Lauren to go up as the replacement nominee. However, that plan was never going to go through. So Lauren was only ever really in danger one time throughout this entire pre-jury phase, which is super impressive. And it just goes to show that Lauren is utilizing this under-the-radar strategy super well. It's gotten to the point that nobody is considering Lauren a threat. Now, in terms of jury prospects, that isn't really spelling the best for Lauren because not a lot of people really respect her. But in terms of threat level, nobody is targeting her. Like, if Rachel or Ashley were to win HOH and the final nominees are Keanu versus Lauren or Kelley versus Lauren, why would you ever get rid of Lauren? Like, yes, maybe there is some sort of scenario where it's like, oh, Lauren is such a small threat, nobody would ever take Lauren out, so let's take her out before she becomes like a block filler or something like that. But when you have such big targets in the house like a Keanu or Kelley and they're sitting on the block, you have to take them out, especially this late into the game. So this puts Lauren in a really, really good position. Plus, this week in particular, Lauren did a lot of good work in rebuilding old connections. She rebuilt her bond with Ava and re-solidified the Bond Girls, which hasn't existed since like week 3 in Lauren's HOH. But the fact that Lauren rebuilt that relationship gives Lauren a lot of good runway. She could use Ava as a connection to rebuild something with the likes of Ashley, or maybe mend her relationship with Will. And this could spell really good for Lauren if it weren't for the fact that Lauren is such an inflexible player. Like, yes, she's physically flexible and can do aerials and stuff like that. But in terms of the game, she is just so loyal to Vince, it's genuinely insane. She's like, I put all of my eggs into one basket with Vince, and Vince is a bad ally, but I guess I have to stick with him now. Like, no, you can leave him. You can leave and find new allies. But Lauren is so committed to Vince, even though Vince has done nothing for Lauren in return, it's genuinely insane. But if Lauren actually wakes up and separates herself from Vince and chooses to connect with like Ava and the such, I think that puts Lauren in a really, really good position to move forward in this game, which is why I have her here at number 3.
Keanu's brain is something that I cannot figure out, like, whatsoever. If you have an ally, why would you put him on the block? I can't even say that because I did that, so.
At number 2, I have Ava. And Ava had a pretty good week this week, surprisingly enough. When Keanu was first announced as HOH, I thought Ava was going to be in a lot of danger, considering that, you know, Ava had put Keanu up on the block, and Ava had a fight with Keanu, and Keanu was at risk to where he was literally one blockbuster away from going home. But for some reason, Keanu just never strongly considered putting Ava up on the block whatsoever. So Ava essentially got to skate by the entire week, which spelled huge for her game. Ava spent basically the entire week socializing and basically re-strengthening all of her relationships. she really reconnected with Rachel's side of the house, and she was able to reformate her relationship with Lauren and reforming the Bond girls, as I previously mentioned with Lauren. So that does put Ava in a really strong position. She has all of these tight connections with Rachel's side of the house, but then she has the likes of Kelley wanting to pull Ava over to where Ava is essentially right in the middle of the house. The only issue is that Ava is at the bottom of the middle, if that makes sense. Even though Ava is being pulled to both sides of the house, Ava is on the bottom of either side, whichever one she wants to go with. Like with Rachel's side, if Ava goes onto that side, Rachel, Will, and Ashley are obviously going to be prioritizing one another over Ava. But if Ava goes over to Kelley's side of the house, Kelley, Vince, Keanu, and Lauren are obviously going to prioritize one another over Ava. So that puts Ava at the bottom of whichever side she chooses, and it's really putting her in a bit of a dangerous position. Short term, she's not in any real danger, but long term, she doesn't have an alliance or any sort of structure around her that is necessarily going to bat for her and wanting to keep her safe. So it does put Ava in a little bit of danger. But as I was saying, Ava is not a target whatsoever. Nobody's really looking at Ava and being like, we need to get her out. Ava is just coasting by and nobody's really considering her a threat, which leaves her pretty safe at this point. But I just fear that later on in the game, she's not really going to have all those connections necessary to keep herself safe when the pickings are slim. And that worries me, which is why I have Ava here at number 2.
I'm getting dragged into the middle of this because I'm perceived as a swing vote this week. However, in a weird personal way, it's kind of cool that people are fighting over me. Never really had that happen before.
At number 1, the HouseGuest I believe to be in the best position in the house as of week 8 is Will. And Will not getting nominated this week is genuinely insane. Like with Ava, at least Keanu was considering putting Ava up as a potential re-nominee. But with Will, not a single thought ever crossed through Keanu's mind of putting Will up on the block, which genuinely makes no sense to me considering how open it is that Will is aligned with Rachel's side of the house. So the fact that Keanu doesn't want to take out a number from his side, yet chooses to not even consider putting Will up on the block is genuinely insane. And it just goes to show how strong Will's social game is as of right now. Everybody loves Will and everybody wants to keep him safe, even though basically everybody knows that Will is strongly aligned with Rachel's side of the house. Maybe Will goes up as a potential pawn if somebody like a Kelley were to win HOH and she needs to make that renom. And obviously, I think Will is in that position to where it's a pretty clear trio between Rachel, Ashley, and Will. So that does put Will in a bit of danger. But if Will is sitting on the block next to either Rachel or Ashley, I don't foresee a world in which people are like, we need to get Will out. And that honestly keeps Will safe. And I don't really see him going home anytime soon. Now, obviously, I think later on down the road, when people are really trying to figure out who their super tight, close allies are, Will might be in a bit of danger. But this week, he was really solidifying his bonds. He reconnected with Ava about their final 2, and he was able to solidify that final 3 between himself, Rachel, and Ashley. So the previous worries I had about Will not having that strong protection and those strong bonds around him, he now has that structure. So Will is honestly in a really, really good spot to keep moving forward in this game. As long as no wonky circumstances take him out at this point, I think Will is going to be in a super strong position moving forward, which is why I have him here at number 1.
Oh my God. You know what? People notice. And I just want to shake his ass and say, dude, stop. That's what I want to do.
Overall, this week was super messy. Maybe not as messy as prior weeks we've had, but it definitely wasn't the cleanest week in the world. We have Keanu putting up his own potential ally in Vince and then somewhat regretting that decision and wanting to pull Vince off of the block. We have Morgan potentially not using the power meter to save herself and wanting to use it on Vince. And then we get yet another Keanu fight between Keanu and Ashley. Like, I thought Keanu was past that phase in the game, but for some reason, Keanu just keeps getting into fights. But now that we're in the jury phase of the game and we have the Masterminds Month of Madness ahead of us, I genuinely have no idea what to expect. I'm just hoping that it's fun and entertaining, and we do still get a BB Can style triple eviction. But those are just my thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you have any of those, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.
I don't like seeing